What's up, Sina?
Hi, guys. Hi. Good to see you guys.
Good to see you too. So this is what Millennials East is Adnan Hussein show, maybe the Red Nation.
East and millennials are killing Adnan Hussein.
It's synergistic podcasting. Hi, guys. Hi, listeners. I don't really know who's hosting this, but I'm just gonna say hi. I requested Jay to do a live stream, and then I put it in the chat to see who's interested in joining us today. I have lots of reasons for this live stream. I'm excited. I don't really typically do these things. How do I sound, first of all? Oh wait, I have to ask the chat. I don't see the chat. Um, but
You don't see? Oh,
I do I sound okay? Okay. I used to do these series. I mean, we've done this series before called The Airing of the Grievances. It's a slight homage to the show that which not be named. I knew that, Seinfeld was a Zionist, but for whatever reason, I still grabbed this title. I just like the term airing of the grievances and yelling at everyone because, yeah, throughout this whole 2 years, we've witnessed a media class just kind of look away. And the same media class who helped wage wars across like continents in the name of human rights. We nothing. It's been crickets. So I was hoping to get you guys on, whoever else wants to go on, to a good old fashioned hate fest. Maybe we can. I was thinking we should scan some headlines today to see how the censorship regime has been working. Obviously, through like straight up suppression of the news and images, like the horrifying news and images that come out every day from Gaza, which in and of itself isn't new. Like strategic blindness is like a tool of the Western media class. But because of how incredibly shocking these images are, how nonstop they are, it's taken an immense amount of work to suppress all of this. So that's kind of what I'm interested in talking about today. Maybe the chat can help us. Um, Now I know what it's like to be a guest on these chats and not be able to see anything. It's like wow, because I'm usually in the producer mode. I'm like, oh, I don't see where the chat is, but it's because I'm a guest here. So I'm just gonna watch the chat personally from my own YouTube channel. But I thank you guys for joining this. There's another reason to all this too, which is this is the world's first backdoor telethon because I have been helping a friend of mine in Gaza, and his name is Muhammad. He's a very kind soul. He's there in the middle there. That's him. He's aged considerably in the time that I've known him. That was from 2 years ago, almost that picture. Actually, maybe a little bit sooner. And Muhammad is 19. He is an orphan taking care of his orphan siblings. He is a very sweet young man, an adult, fully grown adult, and has been for a while because of the fact that he takes care of his kids, these siblings, his siblings, and he's been struggling. The donations have dried up. Things have been pretty rough for him. I personally see the stress in his texts and his messages. I see he went, for a long time he held it together for everyone. I can tell, and he obviously still is. That like he would just be jovial and hey brother, how are you doing? He would always ask about me, and like this guy's in like a middle of a war zone. He's like the sweetest, most polite. Yeah, it's very heartbreaking. And recently he had his hand got hit with some shrapnel. The bomb the house right beside his. They attacked. They were forced to flee. I think this is the seventh time they've been forced to evacuate. Um, so I'm just hoping that throughout the time of this live stream, every now and then, I'm going to check back in and remind people. Obviously, there's thousands, possibly tens of thousands of other fundraisers happening. So I understand that people can't get to it, but I thought maybe we could use the power of YouTube and our community here. Maybe just $5. I think it'll make him happy just to see it come in. Yeah, so that's the other reason. So we're gonna hang out here. We're gonna do some good. We're gonna talk. to some people. We'll see who drops in. Some other friends might be dropping in. I'm gonna bombard the Techie Group Therapy chat to see who's available. And yeah, I'm looking forward to chatting with you guys. And look who's here. Hi, Nick.
Good morning.
Good
Hey,
morning.
Nick.
Good morning from his
Apologies,
beautiful office.
I lost my voice, so I'll try my best to contribute.
Oh wow, the trooper. Thank you,
Yeah.
Nick. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I thought maybe before we get into actual headlines, I'm curious. All of you have been watching the same things and also watching the same silence and the same liberal media machine that we live with, so that has such an omnipresent force in our lives just because of the scale of it, and also because of the scale of English. So it's not just when we talk about the media class, we're talking about like the anglophone media class, like billion native English speakers and their representatives in like professional media, which are not inconsiderable, shrinking though they may be. But there has been an almost unbreakable wall of silence around this, which actually, like, if it wasn't so sinister, you'd be like impressed with like, how do you manage that? How do you manage potentially tens of thousands of newsrooms into just blanket silence, or into like, if not blanket silence, but like, forget below the fold, we're talking 3-4 pages in, like, we know it's remarkable. And on top of that, that they the beginning of all this is that they basically all worked in unison, the media class, I mean, to help sell the basic lie of October 7th being this like slaughter, which was like, no, it was a mass Hannibal event arranged by the Israeli Zionist forces. So I'm just curious, whoever wants to start, get out. I mean, general thoughts on, because it's more than just censorship. It's beyond that. Like, there is direct censorship, obviously, but that's like the least of their energy that going to like something else.
Well, I want to talk about that a little bit because I don't think now it's just a matter of the wall of silence. What we're witnessing now is the manipulation of some attention, but crafted in a way that continues to perpetuate the genocide, to delay any kind of concerted action to stop it, while dramatizing Palestinians as victims without putting it in any context, so that we have a framework that looks to and reports on some of the components of how people in Gaza are suffering, but isolates this in the direction towards a politics of recognizing a state of Palestine in the UN, or the liberal distancing, from the consequences of the media's decisions early on not to really report what was going on, but to promulgate all of these lies that help provide a warrant for the genocide. Now, some of these same people are making a pretense of, concern and regard for Palestinian suffering, but only in a way that prevents, at this point, of direct accountability and stopping the genocide, right? So this is, I think, even more pernicious, is that now you have The Guardian, for example. It'll put what's happening in Gaza possibly on the front page, of its news website, but it won't be calling out, Keir Starmer's government, for its total complicity, for the Akrotiri surveillance flights that provide direct targeting for the Israeli military. So I think what we're dealing with now is that there is some discussion of it, and that's because of the pressure and the fact that it's gone on for so long, and because they want to put some distance in terms of responsibility and accountability. Once Gaza is completely destroyed, they want to be able to say, oh yes, this went too far, but after it's too late to do anything about it. Right now, things can be done, to stop it. So that's just one sort of thought. But I like that idea of airing the grievances, because that's a very double-edged kind of word. It's what we might complain about the world order, about the media, about the complicity. but it also comes from the word grief and grieving, because this is what we're feeling every single day. 700 days. Is it 701 now? It's like we just passed the 700-day mark. Is every day has been just absolutely destroyed with grief, and so we're trying to take the steps, and let's highlight again that this is meant to also be a fundraiser for Muhammad and the family members and the group that he is the sole provider for, is that they have experienced loss after loss, oppression, destruction of their entire world, constant fear and concern. And if you have any kind of a heart, any kind of empathy, you are in grief. But this cannot be grief that is turned inward. This has to become grievance, as you're saying, is that we have to project this kind of feeling and process it by trying to do things, by make people aware and motivate for action. So I'm very appreciative of this stream, and I hope that's both an outcome that Muhammad and all the others who are suffering, you can choose your preferred. This is what's also disgusting about the situations, that our only way of helping are through these kind of individualized sort of responses. What we want is a collective response. We want some intervention to stop this genocide. But in the meantime, we're left with our feelings of grief and trying to support people. But let's turn that into grievance, as you're suggesting, into some kind of collective and organized action.
Thank you. No, I want to say, we've already started getting donations in, and somebody gave, like, I'm gonna start crying, $100 already. So thank you. It's so, yeah, this is so sweet. Thank you guys. Keep them coming. Who wants to? Yeah, Jay, you want to go next?
I just wanted to ask you something, Sina. So, Muhammad and his siblings, are they trying to move south? Is that part of? Yeah. So, I mean, I think
they're trying to move south. They were in the north for a long time. Their community. I mean, I think people need to understand what's at stake, right? Like especially when you go to the north, and you're a civilian, obviously this Zionist militia is after you. They hunt you down, and they are trying to chase everyone out of the north, which means like finding families, finding like large pockets of people, and attacking residential homes. So when you move into this area, not that this isn't true for places in the south, but the north, they are trying to exterminate the north with particular zeal. And the fact, and I'll be honest, guys, like I've said this before, like every morning, like I send these messages to Muhammad before we go to bed, and then in the morning, I don't see them being received, and that's the morning until I hear from him. That's where I am in the morning. Like you're just like, I don't know. Like I'm gonna check right now. No.
Yeah, I mean, just to add to that, like this is a lot of what I'm seeing from folks in Gaza right now, right? As you have a lot of people who had remained in or around Gaza City, right? And as there is this like, genocidal siege entering, the largest, city in Gaza, right? With around 1 million people that have still been there, that they're now under evacuation orders, right? And so folks who have found a way to kind of remain and to defy, I mean, the Zionists have been trying to move them south throughout this whole war, basically. um, and they're just in this position now where a lot of them do need extra money too. That's really the point I wanted to make too. I mean, obviously, Palestinians in Gaza constantly need money because they can't work and they have to buy food and, all of these things, which is just, so disgusting. But beyond that, a lot of these families need financial support to be able to, get someone to help them drive south, or some way to get their stuff, and try to move to one of these new concentration camps inside of a concentration camp built on top of the rubble of their homes and everything else. And so I just wanted to share a little bit of that context, because I'm seeing this from a lot of Palestinians in Gaza right now, this same issue where they're like, we have the evacuation orders now, and we don't have the means to move ourselves south. And so, some also are choosing, I've seen people ripping them up, and some people are like, I'm going to stay. And if they kill us, they kill us, but like, imagine being put in that kind of, horrendous genocidal position where you have to decide, whether to move south into a kind of tent city built on, rubble in Rafah, right? Or whether you try to remain, in a shoot to kill area that we know that the Zionists will be massively bombarding and blowing up with, armored personnel carriers with IEDs in them and things like this, right? And so, it's hellish. And I think this speaks to the point that you're talking about, Sina, about the media. Like, we're not hearing any of that in the Western press. Like, that reality, which is unfolding every day, and which, Palestinians sharing from Gaza are really the only way that's getting out. And they've killed so many of the journalists that have been in Gaza, the Palestinian journalists in Gaza, that they're not able to disseminate it as broadly as they were at earlier stages of this genocidal war. And so, yeah, I just wanted to give folks that context, in terms of supporting Muhammad, but also in terms of supporting other Palestinians right now in this situation, is that is the kind of context that they are forced into. And there's a media blackout really around that reality in the West.
I'll jump in here. Again, excuse me for my voice. It sounds like a frog, and I'm going to talk about frogs because this is a topic of conversation that we've had in our chat with some of the comrades here. But I just want to put up a concept that I heard the other day. It's called ritual human sacrifice. And I think that's what we're witnessing in this particular moment. The notion of a ritual is like a religious or solemn ceremony that has like a series of actions performed in accordance to a prescribed order. Obviously, these are human beings. Many of them are children. Many of the people in Gaza are children. I think it's like around 47%. The population is under the age of 18. And the third term, sacrifice, is the act of slaughtering an animal or a person as like surrendering that possession as an offering to like a supernatural figure or God. And we can see clearly that the Zionists have used scripture, have used biblical justification for what they're doing in this particular moment. Of course, it gets filtered through the Western lens as a humanitarian crisis, as something that is a tragedy without cause. I think that's what we see. If there's any similarities you're looking for in histories or parallels, you can look at the genocide of American Indian people in North America. Typically, you'll hear, oh, well, they all died of disease and starvation. Well, how did that disease and starvation happen? It was imposed conditions of war, much in the same, using the same underlying biblical or religious justifications for the inferiority of a certain group of people, that they can be sacrificed. And I'm pulling up this quote from Yvonne Adwambo Owuor, who is a Kenyan writer. She gave this really beautiful speech. I think, I don't know who shared it in our chat, but I've been returning to it. And I think I think it was Arash who shared a quote from it. And this quote, I mean, it's, if you should share it in the show description, but she writes, we, like frogs in slowly boiling water, adjust, rationalize, adapt until the scalding lunacy feels like weather. We have become used to the temperature of despair. And by that she means the people who are observing this genocide on their smartphones. And if we go back to this act of genocide, that has a prescribed religious order to it, of ritual human sacrifice, of ritual child sacrifice. They're committing, as we talked about in this, or in our chat, like the ultimate taboo, and normalizing that for the rest of the world. And it's not a, I mean, it could be a reflection on the evilness and the depravity of Zionism, but also what does that say about us, who are like that frog, who have been accustomed to this weather or these temperatures of despair. And I think what we constantly battle with, in, you know, as observers of this, is how do we not succumb to despair? How do we not succumb to normalization of this reality and to reject it at all turns? And I think that's the one small thing that we can offer as people who are observing this and trying to stand in solidarity and support people like Muhammad and the millions of others who are facing, you know, this existential reality. That's all I have to say. I can't really speak anymore because my voice is really shot. But
Yeah, that's a great image. I think the point of the image is that ultimately the frog is boiled to death. So if we and it's a slow creeping process. The whole point about the boiling frog analogy is that if they perceive that they are actually being boiled to death, they will just jump out before they get to that point. But the slow normalization and boiling is normalizing our own, sacrifice. Is that the intent here? Just as Gustavo Petro said in his remarks at the, meeting in Colombia, the Hague 30, the Hague group. He said that this is what the rich intend for the rest of the world. And so that kind of politics of solidarity is so important to realize and to recognize that the normalizing of this means that it can happen, will happen, actually, to all of us, if we don't actually put a stop to it. But the other kind of interest, I've seen this metaphor used as well. For example, people at the cradle, when analyzing what the strategy of the axis of resistance was, thinking about, the complex calculations that you have to deal with when facing the U.S. empire as it supports and works through its domination of the region through Israel, that it is a nuclear armed state. And, if you alert it to the fact that it is actually collapsing and about to reach its end in this kind of slow politics, if it realizes this, it could jump out. But as our friends at Resistance is Fertile put it in an episode where they talked about this, is how do you boil a psychopathic frog? It's very difficult because one thing that both the Western elite and the Zionists, and also I don't really think that it's worth distinguishing between these things very much anymore. It's like silly to kind of think of them as separate groupings, but that kind of elite is so nihilistic and sadistic that they are willing, to take the rest of the world down. I mean, you see this in every aspect of its politics, the ecological devastation. They're willing to keep going, and if it destroys this planet, fine, we'll find some other solution. We'll, go into space, we'll colonize Mars. We'll, basically not confront the reality that the biosphere is a collective good, they're willing to sacrifice all of that. And that's why I think that ritual human sacrifice, but what's interesting about the ritual human sacrifice is that it was done, in order to propitiate, some other understood higher force. What's bizarre and pathological about this is that this is for the self-narcissistic, nihilistic self-aggrandizement of a, corrupt and disgusting elite, that they're willing to do this, not because it is seen as some kind of propitiation to a higher or more powerful power that you have to negotiate with, but actually for their own self-fulfillment, which can lead to the destruction of all the rest of humanity. And that's what's so disgusting and dangerous about this situation.
I mean, yeah, go ahead, Jay.
No, you go ahead.
I think the image, God, I think this is something that we have to think about every day. But this entity and what it represents, and its like interests and all of it, sort of the network of countries around it that support it, like they are constituted through people, through millions of people, right? Some actively pulling on that rope, some actively working in, say, military, intelligence, political, economic, right? And it takes a lot of work to do that. It takes a lot of work to sustain a foreign project like this. It takes millions, if not tens of millions, of actual direct human hands to feed, clothe, get these people all of their life needs. And then that's not even including their military machine, which is considerable, which eats up a considerable chunk of our planet. And at the end of the day, the scary thing is that these people, this small chunk of humanity, like these Zionists and all of their allies, which are not, we have to talk about that, which are not huge in number, but in passivity, if you count the people who aren't doing anything about it, then they actually are considerably large in number. That these people are actually bringing down like the downfall of our planet. Like it's straight up. It's like it really, Adnan said it, but like we just have to say it out loud. Like this is a Hitlerite decline, but on a planetary scale. It's not even regional at this point. South Lebanon, Yemen, Syria, Iraq, for 12 days there, Iran. Like their wave of devastation is not enough. They have to destroy the planet at this point. And that's actually what they've threatened openly with their Samson doctrine, that they will destroy the planet. And they're clearly happy to destroy their greatest allies, economic and political and military base. They're happy. They seem happy to do it, right? Like I know that like it's hard to parse the agency of all these actors, because like what do you even, like at this point you can't even call it two separate countries, right? Like it's Zio-American entity, and it operates through a network of smaller vassals of a diverse array of, made up of a diverse array of like ethnic origins, right? So you have like an Arab wing, you have a European wing, you have a third world wing that like aids and abets all of this. You have its like Eurasian pivot in Russia. You have its economic supplier, China. Like all the rules break when it comes to this entity. Like up is down, black is white, cats and dogs living together. Like it doesn't matter. It all towards like it all goes towards feeding this beast. And if you think about how crazy that sounds, when we're talking about a fraction of the global population lives in this country, like that is like the entity. And then, okay, so then extend that to its Western allies, and that's still a small chunk of the planet. Right, when you include KKK America, fake Canada, upside down cancer land Australia, whatever, racist people South Africa, like all of those white settler colonial nations still don't make up like the majority of our planet, and they seem intent on destroying it with using this entity as the vanguard, right? Like, do we even need to say out loud that like, and this media class like aids and abets it in various ways, but primarily it's like it's a kind of strange double movement, simultaneous movement of making excuses and covering it to help make it go longer, but also not showing it, not showing the consequences, not showing the violence in order to quell any popular resistance that could grow, which grows anyways because people, despite having to go out of their way to see this, are doing it. So it makes it even more painful that they're going to destroy this planet, because there are people on this planet who are good. Like, there are good people and there are like good possibilities for our planet. And like, that nihilism that they have is like going into me sometimes of like, yeah, fuck it, like, nuke it. Just nuke this place. This is what we deserve. Like, this is, and then you have to like stop your brain and to be like, no, that's them talking through you. Like, that hatred of the world is what infects you, and you have to fight it. And like, it sounds so cheesy, but like, I talked to Mohammed, and this sweet young man who's like has the world on his shoulders. You know, just, this is like, there's two visions of humanity. There's like the scum goons who, you know, the media class are one of them, represent them in a lot of ways, directly and indirectly. And then there's like the good people of the world, like Muhammad and his friends and his comrades and allies, and the people who fight for them. And that's our choice going forward. That's our choice. This is the structuring and, like, you know, analogy of like structuring force of a political world, of like the good people versus the bad. I mean, really, it's so Manichaean at this point. I never thought I would talk like this, but really at this point, you don't have time for nuance. You don't have time for things. So like, I don't know what, I want to know how we do critique after this, because like, I've been trained in my humanities brain, you know, like, child of the Frankfurt School that I am, like, unfortunately, I say that with like embarrassment, like this whole fetishization of critique, right? It's like the religion of a certain secular class of intellectuals. A religion, actual religion, is like critique, ruthless critique, you know, whatever. Like, they add different kinds of words to it to like change it and whatever, like distance critique, close critique, whatever, and anything. And at the end of the day, you still have this, to put it like mildly, politically neutered intellectual and cultural class that, with notable exceptions here or there, has largely accepted this fate. It's largely like the fate of, oh, this is normal to do this human ritual sacrifice as I watch. It's normal to have my students like nearly murdered on the UCLA lawn, like in front as like cops watch. It's normal. And it's normal for the administration to then turn around and give like millions of dollars to some like bogus law schools put on by the people who helped like perpetuate that violence. Like, this is all normal. Like, it's normal that the society, like US society, is crumbling to its core.
And to pay reparations to those who support genocide on college campuses. I think that's one of the most, I mean, that's actually, there's again, that's a historic parallel. Like, the people who committed genocide here in this state, and then when Dakota people fought back and destroyed their farms and kicked them out, the government came and paid reparations. I mean, this isn't, I think one of the things you're talking about, Sina, is I think at the beginning of this, people were like, how did this happen? Like, how are we letting this happen? It's like, because we live in countries where this is the norm. Like, this is the precedent, like, this is the foundation. Like, you don't even know the languages, you don't know the plurality and the depth and the millennia of history and culture that existed before, in spite of, and will probably persist at the end, you know, of this project. And it was reminding me of this, I don't know who I was in conversation with, but they're like, there's two kinds of people in the world. There's those who are doing everything to stop this genocide, to fight it in whatever capacity that they have. And there are those who are perpetuating it. There is no nuance. I agree with you. I think critique is an important project only if you're propelling a certain project forward or a certain movement forward. Otherwise, it's just solipsism, or, you know, just narcissism, or navel gazing. And when I look at the media class, it might seem like they're doing like they're doing sympathy or they're doing empathy by portraying these acts of genocide, but it's decontextualized in the way that allows for the creation of, you know, what Mohammed El-Kurd called the perfect victim, right? That we have to have these perfect victim narratives. And I was thinking about this, I've been thinking a lot about this in the context of how even some, you know, coming from a family of genocide survivors, I don't even know if I really like that term, because that's not all we did. We didn't just survive a genocide, we like actively fought back against it generation after generation after generation. And when I was having this conversation with Justin Poder in our podcast, The Book of Genocide, there was this native scholar who was saying we should, you know, sympathize with the Canaanites when they were, you know, when they were the victims of the Israelites who came to conquer them and to destroy them and extirpate them from the land. And I was like, I don't know if I don't accept that kind of binary. I don't want to be just the victim of a genocide. I want to be the people who stopped that genocide, you know, who activated, who resisted, who the men in sandals, you know, who have shown that this is, you know, have broken the spell of invulnerability that surrounds this entity. And that entity is this entity too. You can't separate them, like you said. But I you know, in this in this piece, going back to Yvonne Oamer's piece, you know, she opens with this quote about how we need to craft a new narrative. And I think in the West and in the humanities, we've engaged in a form of iconoclasm. I don't know how to say that. Iconoclasm. I don't know if that's the correct. I should know this. Iconoclasm, and to say that there's, you know, there was the resistance movements of the past engaged in all kinds of problems, and that we can't, you know, we don't have a connection to them, or they're problematic, or leaders are bad. But if you read Palestinian resistance literatures, like there's a romance, there's, you know, a spirit to this kind of resistance that's grounded in a reverence, not just for martyrs, but for heroes. And in this moment, it's like the West has no heroes. I mean, just be honest, like there's no heroes. We've killed all of our heroes. That doesn't mean that we can't have more, but I think we do need to craft a different story and a different, you know, a different tale, I think is what that Illich, is it Ivan Illich quote at the beginning of it says. And I think that's what you know, we have to have a heroic act of creation of a new kind of tale that tells one of not just being the objects of genocide, but ones who have actively resisted at all, you know, at all turns, that we said, you know, this is, you know, no, because otherwise, who are we? You know, who are we to? What kind of ancestors are we going to be to the future generations? And that's what I'm most concerned about. You know, in terms of not just stopping this, but like what are we telling the future in terms of our actions right now?
Yeah, no, beautifully said, Nick. Um, the one of the things that you raised, the question of critique, which you both kind of talked about, Sina and Nick, but you know, that as something that stuck with me recently, I had a conversation with Chris Gilbert and Sierra Pascual Marquina like a couple months ago, and it was related. They had a special issue of Monthly Review on communes in Venezuela, and you know, I kind of was talking to them towards the end about some of the, you know, at different phases, both Sierra and Chris have sort of looked at the Maduro government and kind of been like, what's going on here? Like, what's the policy? Like, what are we doing around this hyperinflation? You know, and they were trying a lot of different things of cryptocurrency, and there was all this stuff trying to break the economic sanctions, right? But it really wasn't working for a long time. And um, you know, he was like, look, he was like, there was this period where there was a lot of stuff that was going on that was weird, that was like hard for us to make sense of. And he's like, I look back at it and I think it was great. Like, he tried everything that he could in order to defend this project and the sovereignty of it. And like, some of it didn't work, but like, he was trying things, you know, the government was trying things. And he said he's like, I've grown to really detest the word critique. And he was actually pleased, I guess, to find out that I can't remember the translation of the term Marx actually used, but it doesn't translate into English as like the same thing as critique. But he was like, the West has this deep fascination with critique, right? And in the importance of always like, critiquing things. And he's like, look, the only real critique, the only meaningful critique is when the masses move, when the masses say, hey, like we're done with this, or we're going to put this forward, or whatever. Like what we think as individuals, it's not to say that it's like totally worthless, but I've felt that. I mean, I'm sure we've all felt that a lot over the last couple of years of like this kind of moment. I think it's actually probably one of the things that has brought us together more and more as folks in this kind of, as Sina likes to call it, the tankosphere. Um, you know, uh,
we gotta get different names. Like
I agree.
we don't have tanks. I'm sorry.
We don't, right? This is a big part of the problem, right? And but the it is just the kind of feeling of like, what am I doing? Am I just sort of screaming into the wind? Like, I mean, and I know that what we do in these channels does mean something to the folks who tune in. And a lot of folks who tune in are like very engaged in trying to do real organizing, whether it's in their communities or on their campuses or in their workplaces and so on. And I think that having conversations with people that can help us deepen our analysis is an important thing that we do for ourselves, but also through the work that we do, it does connect into movements. But I think the big thing is this question of like, how do we strengthen, our movements? How do we build something that, how do we bring forces together, whatever it is, right, to have something that can wage a meaningful critique, right, that can wage a critique at a kind of mass level. And it's hard in a society where, we've talked about this a lot, but so many of the people that you will kind of move past in the day to day are just, going about their day, and you know, don't just don't care, or have part of the way that imperialism has affected them over their lives is that they've just learned that like, oh, we don't talk about foreign policy, or these kinds of things. Or maybe they do care, but they say like, oh, there's nothing we can do about that, right? Or there's, and so I'm still struggling in that reality myself of kind of to the question you raised, Sina, is yeah, what is the value of critique? I think at this point, unfortunately, it's pretty limited. And how do we make it into a more powerful weapon? Yeah.
So I was doing an exercise. I was just random. I don't read any American things like whatever, like I don't know. So I just picked the first few things in my head that came up, like anglophone media. And like let's be real for a second. We're watching like one of the most violent holocausts ever take place. Okay, that's the reality, even compared to incredible violence of Iraq, two Iraq wars, Syria. Like what we've watched in Gaza is some it is a ritual slaughter, and it's spectacular in a sense. Like it's the spectacle of slaughter. It's the greatest like slaughter spectacular ever fashioned by imperialists. And I use that word not like ironically, like it's not, I'm using it like literally. They want a spectacle, so they made one to make an example of them. Okay, so with all that, I'm gonna go to Jacobin magazine. I'm gonna share, unless you want to do it, Jay. Here, I'll just go to Jacobin, and we're gonna go down the headlines. Okay, these are the headlines. Are you sharing or am I sharing it, Jay? Oh, you do. Okay. This is, so we're gonna look. Okay. All right. This is Jacobin.
Also, I just want to shout out Dwayne Monroe, who we've had on a couple of times. He called Jacobin the McDonald's of socialist analysis, and I think the Happy Meal. He called it the Happy Meal of socialist analysis, and I
I
thought
don't
that
know.
that was
McDonald's is too highbrow for them. It's like Arby's. Yeah, but let's just go. Keep scrolling down. Okay, this is the reality of this is the left wing press. Okay, nothing. Striking airline Die Linke. Nobody cares about the fucking Linke. Nobody cares about Die Linke. Okay? There are more people in the Al-Qassam brigades than there are in Die Linke. Okay, guys? Die Linke is not going anywhere. It's time to let go. Nothing. The word Gaza is not on here. Okay? Let's just be real. Okay, let's go to Sidecar, the illustrious blog of our Trotskyite elders at the New Left Review. Let's see this one. This is something else too.
What is this, Sina? Where do I go?
Sidecar, the shitty blog that nobody reads, where they put shorter articles to pair with the longer articles that nobody reads at NLR. It's like okay, now okay, this is yeah. Okay. There's one right there, one article. Do you want to click on that? That's about a movie. Okay. That's about a movie. Scroll down. It's about 4 paragraphs. Okay. I think 4, 5, maybe 8. Not very long. Less than 2,000 words, I would say. You could say, I think. They go back. That is from recently, I think. That's from 28th of August. Now keep going.
Yeah.
Keep going down. Britain, Rumpelstiltskin. What does that even mean? Trump, Ukraine. An article about Dubai for some reason, which was actually not bad. I clicked on it accidentally, and then I ended up reading it accidentally. Press load more, Jay, please. The general, okay, no. Bulgaria and the euro, nobody cares. Mamdani, something about expressways. Okay, there's one. June 27th. By another, Frederick Lordon, a first essay. It's an essay about Zionism. Okay. Zionism with, and then, so that's, and then again, not very long. I mean, these pieces aren't supposed to be long. And then keep going. They have two articles back to back. One by Tariq Ali, another by Eskander. And
Well,
I'm pretty sure
Tariq,
that's the Tariq Ali. Go ahead.
but that's on regime change in Tehran.
Yeah, I know, but like that's what I mean is that they had more on Iran, as much on Iran since June as on Gaza.
Mm-hmm.
And that was with a war. Let's see what else. I remember scrolling for a little bit.
But Sina, I think this is really reflective of the fact that they think it's over.
They got bored.
They think the story has been concluded. There's some final actions to take place. Oh, well, there's something actually valuable. Okay.
Yeah.
Amori, who's like co-founder of, Palestine
Action. Yeah.
They went after they got like essentially like a celebrity. I'm not saying it's bad. That's good though. Like I just meant more that the actual substance of analysis is the analysis has given way to like an interview with someone who's a big name, mind you, so it's good, but you actually putting work into something, like analyzing something for your readers, requires you to find someone to write about it. Like I'm pretty sure neither of those people who wrote about Gaza were even Palestinian. I mean, whatever, put that aside for a second. But I on it, keep going, Jay. It's actually kind of shocking how much little interest these guys have in Gaza. I mean, that to me is something else. Like, this is not hard to get people to write a 2,000 word blog post on Gaza, the most important geopolitical conflict, like engagement in our time. I don't know. If you're me, I would be like, yeah, this is important. But This is
I
like there's
agree.
more articles about Trump. There's like half a dozen about Trump.
I
So
agree,
is
but
it
this is
provincialism?
well, I think this is like very indicative of Western Marxism. I mean, this is why I don't read New Left Review or Jacobin, and we just don't have people on basically our platform from these publications, because it is that kind of, I mean, I think Max Isle at one point just said like, look, it's racist, which I think is right. I mean, like you could find, I think Max on one of our shows we had with him was like, look, you could find Palestinians who agree with your politics. Like you can find them, you know what I mean? Whatever you think, right? You can find the ones that, wanna
Yes, and
go on
Abu
a rant.
Shabab, you can find him, and you can write an article in the Wall Street Journal for you.
That's right, and so on some level it is just racism, but on another level, I mean, I think Western Marxism is deeply infused with Zionism, and it is deep, and so a lot of these people have friends, close relationships with people who are Zionist, and in on top of that, it just has just such a horrible track record on anti-colonial solidarity, and I think I mean, yeah, I just recommend people read other publications for one thing. But I know what you're saying, because these are two of the biggest, right? These are huge, and a ton of people do read them. So I get it. But
Um,
that's the
can you do the
diagnosis.
nation next? Sorry, go ahead, Ivan.
Oh
But
well, I don't. Why do we even want to
honest
go
guys,
through?
no, because it's so illustrative of like
It,
they'll look at anything. It tells you about there is a machine at work, and that machine is working in like amazing like level of cooperation between each other, and it's just I don't know. The
well, that
silence is
yeah.
so amazing.
Well, I mean, see, that's the thing. Is it's basically what Jay was saying, is that this is basically the problem with a form of Western left, Western Marxism, that has not confronted the realities and the consequences of colonization and contemporary imperialism. And like I was saying, is they think that the story is actually over, because they don't identify and they don't validate the anti-colonial resistance that is still going on as we speak. Okay, why is there's suddenly talk of another ceasefire and peace deal? Like there's a lot of ways to be very cynical about it, but fundamentally it was announced a month ago that the Israelis were going to go in and they were going to destroy Gaza City. They still haven't done it. They haven't really even properly embarked on it, which means not just bombarding from above, but actually send really troops in to attempt to clear it, because they can't raise the troops. They, faced resistance recently that was showing that, there's still a powerful and capable anti-colonial resistance taking place, and that it's going to be extremely costly to actually go in and try and defeat it, which they haven't yet been able to do. And so as a result, there is a talk again about like some kind of ceasefire, and Israel is saying that we will only accept a full sort of deal, like all the hostages and all at once and disarmament, etc. But that's not what they were saying just a few weeks ago. What they were saying just a few weeks ago is, we're going to go in and end it in Gaza City. We're going to take the entire territory, right? But they keep having to get Trump to bail them out with some kind of... So the point is for this Western left, they keep thinking the story is concluded. They're already positioning themselves for post-Gaza politics. What they don't understand is there is no post-Gaza politics. There's none. This is it. This is the time right now. There's not going to be a post-Gaza, because the entire condition of the world now, the global future, is hinging upon what happens now. So they're already projecting. They already have this kind of, view of Eurocentric hegemony, that they've already thought that, like, ultimately Palestinian resistance will be over and that there will be, kind of Zionist control, and it's just about what do we do in that kind of condition. And so when we were talking a little bit earlier about the reworlding Africa and the need, if you're going to sculpt the future, I mean, it's very important that you reorient the kind of narratives that you have about the past. And we are still suffering, despite at least a few generations of, like, anti-colonial history that has not broken into kind of mainstream consciousness. And perhaps it can't, because that's the ideology of Western supremacy, of white supremacy, of the victory of capitalism, of European hegemony, is to keep saying that there is this one historical trajectory, and we have to hang on to that narrative that grounds our sense of superiority. We really, despite several generations of historians confronting it, have not really rewritten the history, the historical narrative, in the compelling sort of way that would give the lie to all of this investment ideologically in. And I see it all the time. I see it with people talking in the era that I work on, which is pre-modern history, is talking about the early Arab and Muslim conquests of the region as a colonial and imperial, right, phase, where it's the Muslims, it's Islam that is this biggest empire, and this is just a matter of a Jewish liberation movement, to restore these indigenous people back to their, rightful territory and land. And this is kind of the crucial thing that I'm seeing constantly, is that there is a way in which a whole history of the world depends on the kind of characterization of Islam as some kind of interruption in the actual, what would have been normal and appropriate trajectory of world history. It's the Muslims, and Islam is an interloper between the ancient and the modern. It's what brings on the medieval. I mean, this is the classic narrative of Henri Pirenne, who wrote this famous book called Mahomet et Charlemagne. Like, you don't get Charlemagne and the whole Holy Roman Emperor and medieval history without the disruption of the Muslim conquest that ends the sort of trajectory of the ancient world continuing on. It's this, like, illegitimate interloping in history, and it has to be eliminated. And this is what's, the politics of the narratives around Palestine, is that there's one ancient people that we're going to pay attention to because they have a scripture that is basically a national history of, like, the foundation of some kingdoms in, ancient times, and gave a rationale for it, that somehow this is now being elevated as the proper history of the region that was sadly and violently altered by the presence of Arabs, of Muslims, of the people we're calling Palestinians, who are illegitimate interlopers in that land. And it's this ethno-national reading of Western supremacist kind of history and of the ancient. That the ancient was what was legitimate, and anything that happens after that doesn't belong there. And modernist nationalist, ethno-nationalist movements, and all of them, it's not just Zionism, are the restoration, right, of a great and glorious people from their ancient history. But the problem is that the Muslims don't have an ancient history, right? If you think of them as a people, as a world kind of civilization, is that they appear on the scene in, the 7th century, right? So that's after, when all of these narratives in the history of the world locate, whether it's like India, like, whether it's like the, whether it's like ancient China, whether it's like, Europe, is that the problem is that this kind of world trajectory, has been interrupted by these other people who don't belong. And so that's the warrant for genocide. It's like, well, they don't belong in this history. And so that's why I think it is so important that we reorient, as this, excellent article that Nick brought up before he had to go, really says what's at stake is the history the way you understand that history, because that is the politics of your future. And that's what's being worked out right now.
Thank you, Adnan. I'm going to share again that article just for folks if you didn't see it. You can find it on The Elephant, and the analysis, Reworlding Africa, Imagination, Time, and Sculpting the Future. Sina, we should give, like, I've been trying to do the math, but I haven't, it's been difficult, but we've raised,
Yeah, you guys
I
have been
think,
amazing.
I think over like $800 since we've
Over
been
800
doing
so far. Thank you
the
so
stream.
much, everyone. I actually started crying. And this is so amazing. I am waiting for him to come online so he can find out. And it's so hard because you think like, if we had like a normal media environment, right? Like if we had a normal media environment that wasn't racist and imperialist, that Palestinians would get as much or actually a lot more attention that the Ukrainians got and still get. And ultimately it comes down, and I've talked about this before, but I'll talk about it again, but ultimately it comes down to like who can be mourned, right? Like who is allowed to be mourned and who isn't. And something that we have to fight back in our position as Westoids is this liberal righteousness in determining who is mournable simply because they have immense media power that we don't have. So they enunciated to us that an Iranian woman that you had never met before, that had never entered into your life before, was worth like 3 months of coverage. Her life and how her was like 2 months, 3 months of every day. And I'll say this again. I always say it. I'm going to say it again. That hundreds of thousands of deaths, hundreds of thousands of women dying in Gaza in the most horrific ways has not received one fraction of a percentage at the give. I mean, this is how sinister these people are. I mean, we face a sinister class of actors, editors, producers, writers, presenters. These people are, I mean, Nick and I just did an episode on They Live, and these are the lizard people we talk about. Like, these are monsters. Like the people who use the word regime, you know, like this is them. Like that's like what they're up to now, is that they are running interference for the world's most fascistic regime, right? Like the most openly fascistic, like angry imperialist person you know is a Zionist. Okay? They are a loud, angry Zionist. And in my case, they're Iranian to boot. like all the fascists that I know are Iranian Zionists. Okay, so this entity has attracted a class of the worst human beings, and around it needs a supporting cast of countries, vassal states, whatever, that are also equally like the cruelest and evil slave regimes. Actually, there's a great article. I hate to give them press. Don't go, find a way to copy and paste it without going to their website. Maybe we'll paste it in the notes just to deny them clicks because we're petty like that. But there's an article on Dubai in that in the sidecar that actually does justice to like what those states are. And remember that liberal media is funded by these fucks. That like the liberal who's like concerned, like especially now the comprador liberal, that like voice from below, that like, you know, Syrian, you know, social scientist who's, you know, employed in some university, like that person is funded by a ghoulish like golf actor, right? Like that unhinged psycho who knows, like screaming Sunni sectarian guy, he's funded by a Qatari. Like this is not like, and you know, this is our media sphere, that if you have enough money, you can buy influence, like the way that everything else works, right? Like that's not just media. That's like, oh, if you want to, you want to influence a university, just buy it. You know, like my UCLA, it has Israel studies and it has Jewish studies. It has both. Like it has two separate centers. This is for like this is because they just like bought their way into the school. And that's the thing, is that like if people who are like listening to this and sad about the state of the world, like what you should be, is that remember all this goes by with like the wealth of the West. Like take the wealth of the West out of this, Israel's done. Israel's done in a week. Like they couldn't even fight a war they started. They had to go to Daddy Yankee to bail them out. And on top of that, they bled their daddy so hard that their daddy had to like recurate their geostrategic plans because of this idiotic war that they got themselves into, that they couldn't fight on their own anymore. And they were taking such a pummeling that they went to their patron, right? So like this is not like the psychopathic frog will affect us all. It is in your life if it hasn't already. So I guess my question is to you guys, and recognize that we've gone on for an hour. I've taken a lot of your time, guys, so I appreciate this. But like really, in our line of work, like all of us are in media. Nick was in media before this too. Like the whole purpose of this is to reach more people. You know, in 2 years, I haven't gotten an episode over 10,000 views, like combined views and listens. I mean, that's what I can do. So like, I'm not going to sit there being like, oh my God, I failed. But like, that's what I did. That's what I could do. That's all I can do. You know, that I could do more. Sure. Like I will do more, but this is like this is the results of my action was like in terms of numbers, right? Like I want to know, like, how do we get millions? Like not just on my channel, but how do we get masses? I mean, I know this is like the $64,000 question that like communists and leftoids have been asking for centuries. You know, like how do we get the masses? Like I think, yeah, exactly. Like, share, subscribe. Like on these, especially like when we're trying to get masses on these platforms that are like hostile to us. I mean, Marx and Engels, for all they did wrong, they published their own shit. Like in their day, like they were their own publishers. Like we, unfortunately, I mean, we publish, but I guess like Libsyn is my publisher, YouTube is my publisher. Like I'm reliant upon these ghoulish Western, mostly Zionist organizations probably to get these messages out. So I'm wondering, like, how do we do better?
The chat is loving what we're doing right now, and you, Adnan, and Sina in particular. I mean, you are asking a question that, of course, we ask ourselves every day and kind of fail to properly answer. Obviously, I mean, all of us, I think, are in relatively a similar sphere in terms of how many people that we reach on our best day. You know what I mean? And so I think that one thing that I think has helped some during this is stuff like this. Like I do think that we have to continue to have more conversations that bring our audiences together. And you know, I mean, not to say that we can't do streams and things like that in our own kind of channels or whatever, but I do think that conversations like this, we all have some folks who may listen more to our show or to your show, Sina, or to your show, Adnan, or to Guerrilla History and so on. And I think that's one thing that we can do, is that if we're asking people to come together and to organize together and to build, is to kind of model that also in our own behavior, and not just be I'm the solo podcaster who's going to give you everything that you need to know. But I don't have an answer in terms of how we reach millions. I mean, some of it is that the folks who do that usually have significant financial backing that we will never receive because of our politics. And they're, and then sometimes there's just questions of style and charisma that we probably also need to study more on our end. I think sometimes on the left, we take a lot of that stuff kind of for granted of, oh, I'll just come in there with guests that have the right analysis and it will grow. And, obviously there's a lot of work to building these. But I think, also just being consistent. Sterling, one of my good comrades, talking about checking out office hours regularly on your show, Adnan. I mean, I think that, you know, I don't know. I don't want to sound too positive because I agree the state of it is quite bleak in terms of our particular section of, left wing, revolutionary analysis that is also fairly antagonistic to these dominant strains of Western Marxism that tend to have more resonance for, I think, a lot of reasons with, people who become interested in left wing ideas, and so I think, yeah, I don't know. There's another question from the chat we can get to, but Adnan, do you want to respond to that Sina's question?
Well, I'm the least experienced of the group here in terms, so I have no answer, how to break, the 2,000 views, but I think, we want to reach millions, but I also think that there is something important about, and with the shared audiences, I notice that there are people who, visit like and listen to a number of these affiliated, allied, compatible kinds of shows, is that and programs and opportunities for discussion is, forging a real depth. There's so much militating against you. There's so much disinformation. There's so much normalizing, as we were talking about at the beginning, through mainstream culture and media, what has to be opposed and objected to, and is really unthinkable. It's a lot of work to try and make these things normal for people, and the resistance to that is also your own mental, psychic. And we had a great conversation with Lara Shihi, and you've had several as well, Jay, on your show about kind of psychic militancy, about defense, psychic defense. Like, you have to actually hear this stuff a lot of times from different sources in different ways with different language, but the same kind of concepts in order to really stay solid. And this is especially true for people who are willing to take some action, to be activists, to organize campaigns, and so on. In our societies and cultures, it is seen as risky. It takes a lot of fortitude. It takes a lot of support to get people into that. So I see this as a matter of quality as well as quantity. It's like you need people who are committed, and one way to commit ourselves and one another and our people in our audience is to keep discussing and talking about this and reinforce it, because it's a practice. It's easy to be turned aside. So that's one role that we have, that even if we can't reach millions, that we're doing something that's important to sustain and continue campaigns, like, for example, support for political prisoners, prisoners of the movement in the imperial core that is actually trying to put their bodies on the line to try and stop the genocidal war machine. Those people are easily forgotten, and there's a lot militating against, support for them. So you have to kind of, it's in our audiences where you might find people who are willing to commit and continue to actively support those people, as opposed to people, who are maybe being reached by millions of the sort of soft left, the Jacobins, when they do talk about Palestine, and occasionally they do, or listen and watch to Zeteo or Kyle Kalinske, or these other shows. They can kind of write to their Congress people. They can do those sorts of things. But who's actually going to stand for the political prisoners who have already taken a big risk? That's like people who are more committed. And that's maybe an audience that we're trying to reinforce and cultivate to make sure that it's still there, because there's so much more pressure on people to avoid, to isolate those who have taken risks and made sacrifices in our movement to advance the cause of Palestinian solidarity. So that would be my kind of response to that, is like, we're not going to reach millions, but this is an important role as well.
I think that's a great point, Adnan, because, a big issue is that we don't have millions of people who are mobilizing around in the United States in particular, but also, Canada, like kind of the areas of our primary audience, although people tune in from all over the world, which is always just amazing to me and beautiful to see. Um, but we don't have millions of people who are looking even for perspectives like ours. But a lot of the people who are looking for what we provide, right, are the folks who are going to be organizing or are going to be, like you say, showing up for political prisoners of the movement and so on. And so I think that, when I hear from those folks, it is that, like when we do the episodes with Lara Shihai or when we do Tanky Group Therapy, they're just like, thank you. Like, I'm really struggling to deal with this world. And it's so important to have people who make me feel like I'm not going mad, right? Because everything around me is totally upside down and absurd. And so I think that you're right, Adnan, that is a really important role. Um, Sina, two things. So there's a question from the audience that I'm going to pull up, but do you want, because it has been a while since the top of the show, do you want to remind folks a little bit about Muhammad and, what, the circumstances are and what we're raising money for?
Yeah, no, thanks. He's yeah, we did this at the beginning of the show. I want to say thank you to everyone who's watching. Like, I'm actually gonna start crying because it's like such a relief. It over 1,200 has come in so far, which is like, I don't know. It's like, yeah, it's very good. I'm happy he's relieved. He's had a real slowdown. I'm like crying tears of happiness, but it's also sad because like I get messages from dozens of Palestinians a day, and like in my head I'm like, I have one that I'm like, you know what I mean? And like my brain, like I'm saying like, oh, this is the person I support. Like, I can't help you. Like, I don't know. I don't know how, and not everybody has like a podcaster with friends who are podcasters who like come on a call and you know what I mean? Like, and I don't know. We have to live with this, and I think the imperialists are betting on us getting tired, and they're certainly betting on Palestinians getting tired, and that's why they starve them. And they assume somewhat, maybe correctly, that that the initial interest, let's say, would die down after you started killing some journalists with big names, right? If you kill enough journalists, if you stop the stream of images, if you cut the internet, all that stuff, it becomes, and then you work your assets, you make sure you find you put out any fires at any media organizations, you find troublesome actors and you yeet them out of existence, right? Like that's what Zionists do. They're methodical. They're not incapable. This is where they have power, and they use it to further their own agenda, which in this case is genocide. So just having these shows has been something for people who listen. I mean, I said this before. The strange prehistory of Tanky Therapy was like a joke that I made about like the nature of these kind of like episodes, kind of group episodes, that they're group therapy, and that like we had a chat and I said, oh, we need a Tanky group therapy, and because like that most of the sort of group therapy pods are sock dem or kind of not interested in this stuff. And the fact is, like in the Anglophone world, most people aren't interested in imperialism because they've like bred the interest out of people. They hide it. They don't even call it imperialism anymore. And so that is something that I wonder about a lot. I wonder about like the relative inaction of large swaths of our population, and how I feel that even though that some have come across images to the point where even Democrats, useless American Democrats, rank and file Democrats, like they now hate Israel with like the fire of 1,000 suns. I mean, you can't help but hate Israel. Like this is what you do. I mean, it's a logical problem though for like say American Democrats who like their guy was doing this before. Like their guy was leading this. Their guy helped get us here. And the guy before them, who was also their guy, the guy that they still love, Obama, like also helped this guy named Netanyahu. So like, I mean, better late than never, sure. But it's forcing a certain class of people to come on. Hello, we have a new guest.
Hey, M2May. So,
Peace,
folks
everybody.
know M2May, my co-host on the Imperial 80s podcast. So, yeah, I just sent the link
Hi,
over,
M2May.
and
Nice to meet you.
good to have you here, man.
Nice to meet you both. Yes, big fans of you both. Listen to y'all quite often. So glad
That's
to be in
so
the
kind.
communion with y'all.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Yeah, we're
to
talking about the
Community.
media class, and yeah, this is. I mean, think of this, guys. Think of all of those liberal institutions that were built during the Cold War for the psyops of Cold War psyops, right? Like Penn, right? Like fucking useless Penn. Like it's so funny they called it Penn, which is like this useless tool now, which is so irrelevant. It's like, call it keyboard now, bro. Get with the times. Like, but it really, like Penn, like these forward facing. I mean, sure, the human rights apparatus has kicked into gear. Fine, I mean, they did it. I mean, they proved how useless they were in the sense that like they're screaming at the top of their lungs, but unlike in the past, they're not pulling on the rope of imperialism. They're actually find themselves pulling against it. So all of a sudden, you've never heard anything about, Amnesty or Human Rights Watch. They've all gone silent. Not silent, but like they're not getting the press they used to, as say when Syria Dirty War was in live action, right? It was so like this apparatus that turns on and off at will, like some strange kind of like set of locks in a river or something. It just like raises the anxiety around something whenever it wants. What's been interesting is that their own credibility obviously went out the window too, and all of this is that like as the Ukraine comparison, but they still haven't, like, they're still pretending like everything's hunky-dory. So they're still doing women life freedom books. Like, can I share? I'm going to share this. They took too long to write these stupid irrelevant books, so now they're coming out. So one of them, her name is Nilu Tabrizi. She is kind of like the young establishment. She just has a new book, and it's what is it called? For the Sun After Long Nights. Moving exploration of the 2000. Yeah, so like they're still doing this charade. They're still, I'll send you you can show it. Like, it's so fascinating that like, it's like you work, listen, Nilu, author of this book, you work for the genocide crew. Like, that's where you get your paycheck. That's how your bread is buttered, is from the genocide crew. And your job is to pretend that that Americans care about Iranian lives. I mean, it's just so nakedly like hilarious. They're charging $40 for this book too. Can you imagine? Yeah, this is something else. So that for me is because I'm always in the Iran bubble, so Iran stuff pops up all the time, and so that's their trick. They find a victim, a representative victim, and then they manufacture an astroturfed support campaign that and this is not to say that like these people don't deserve mourning. Like someone's executed in Iran for whatever reason, good or false or bad or correct or unjust, like that's something we have to take seriously. But because these freaks who actually don't care about these people because they use them as a flag are often direct like proxies for Zionists, often, not always, but often. In the case of Nilu Tabrizi, she works for Zionists. She works for the New York Times. She's helping the genocide. Her organization is helping the genocide. But like in the same breath that they do that, they say, "Oh, Iran, human rights, Iran, human rights," like a Quranic student, just humming back and forth their same, and we have to live under this, and I just can't take it anymore. I'm mad as hell. It's like network. I'm gonna lose my mind.
Yeah, I mean, the point about that you said, Sina, about just the notion that they care about Iranian lives or anything related to Iran, right? I mean, it is kind of wild to have these books coming out at the moment that you have this Zionist war on Iran that the U.S. also participates in, that they rush to end. By the way, great conversation you had recently with Max Isle, kind of talking about all of that people should definitely check out if they have not. Um, Mtume, I want to bring you into the conversation. I don't know if you have any introductory comments, but there's a question from our chat that you could also respond to if not, which we all should address. Thanks, Alex, for the super chat. But when talking to someone who is apolitical, how do you gentlemen describe who the enemy is? And so maybe Tume, you could kind of start us off with that, along with whatever else you want to kind of add to the conversation.
Well, it's one thing I will start with is something that Sina was to kind of carry on from about Iran. You know, in the art film world, Iran is one of art film's favorite places to be humanitarian and have a bleeding heart. And Gaza is an interesting and has been an interesting kind of intervention, I think, into the art film world, because you saw what happened at Berlin Film Festival, where, you know, and I don't want to get into the politics of certain filmmakers who have decided to kind of eat off of this kind of fetishization of Iran and Islamic culture within the Western art film world. I'm not going to debate that right now. But, you know, to their credit, a number of them were like, well, look, there's a genocide happening and I'm not going to not speak about it. And of course, they were kicked out of festivals. Some of them pulled their films out, so forth and so on. So it's become this interesting highlight on the humanitarian liberalism that exists within the art film world that is just pernicious. And to the grand point, they don't really care. They want to use these films and these cultural products as a way to say, you know, the Middle East and Iran is a degenerate place. You should not support it, so forth and so on. Look at these, you know, diasporic people who are now here in the West, who are so elevated because they've had Western education and Western enlightenment, yada, 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 yada. We all know this stuff. So, you know, you made me think of that. And I think to a broader kind of thing for myself, one of the things that I've been tracking, and I said this kind of very early on, is like how are artists positioning themselves in this, you know, in this moment. And it's been interesting to kind of watch, you know, the various levels. And a lot of it has to do with, you know, where you are in the social mobility ladder of the arts world. You know, if you are high up there, and there's people who do lots of things, and I'm not gonna make one kind of large blanket like this person has done this or this community does this. But one of the interesting things that I've seen is that people trying to find a way, even when they say, you know, end the genocide, ceasefire, they're still trying to find a way to kind of manage themselves within the liberal order, right? There's I think it was like maybe even yesterday, another big document signed of a bunch of like media practitioners, directors, and things like that in the film world saying, I haven't read through it, saying, you know, we want you to divest in these things, right? Or even the recent Venice Film Festival thing with Gal Gadot saying, you know, disinvite her and all that. My thought would always is like, why are you still supporting the Venice Film Festival, which is imperialist? But that's a whole other conversation. But actually, it isn't. It's actually, I think, the ground of the conversation. But yeah, it's like, I think what frustrates me is it's just the logics that I'm seeing don't seem to add up, because I'm always kind of like, well, if they were to like maybe do this one little thing that satisfy you, you still think this large imperial kind of project of mass media is a good thing, right? And like how come you can't see the contradictions that in this? It just doesn't. It's like it's not adding up. I mean, I am happy to a degree that you are advocating for people, but like how far does that advocacy actually go? And it's a frustrating line, because, you know, I don't want to limit the support that Palestinians are getting. So I don't want to be that guy. You're not giving the real support. Da, 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 da. But the same token, I'm also kind of like, you know, I think some of y'all need to do a little bit more. to be perfectly honest with you. You need to kind of step your game up. There's people who don't have the social mobility cachet of you who have sacrificed a lot. And look, our sacrifice is nothing compared to the Palestinian people. I'm not putting ourselves on that level. But, look, within the gradient scale here in the imperial core, like, come on, some of y'all with a lot of clout could be doing a whole lot more. You just want to honestly feel better about your jobs and that you have, dinner with people who are Zionists every, or maybe even your agent or someone like that is a supporter of genocide, and you want to feel better about it. I forgot the other question. Could you bring the question back up, Jay, so I could look at it again?
Yeah, for sure. So
Yeah.
Alex asks, when talking to someone who is quote unquote apolitical, how do you gentlemen describe who the enemy is?
I mean, I usually start with like, who do they see their enemies are? Kind of, you see this in organizing work on the ground. You kind of have to know how people position themselves, right? I mean, because then one of the things that might happen is you might realize they're not as apolitical as you think, and they might think, the immigrant worker is their enemy. So then you're gonna have to parse that out, right? You know what I'm saying? I think I don't think it's really general. I think you kind of have to figure out like how they position themselves, their kind of viewpoints within this social structure, and then go from there. That would be like my short answer. That's usually kind of where I start. Always trying to lead them back that, however you want to put it, is it the capitalist class, however you want to put it, the Western imperialist class, are the people that you need to be keying in on as your enemy. I'm gonna try to lead them there, but I kind of need to see like who they already see, because I actually don't believe that all the apolitical people that I know really do have like political lines. They have people that they think are enemies and they don't. I find the line of apolitical to be, I don't want to talk about it. That's really how I see it these days. I have a homie who claims to be apolitical, but like he's on rants all day about, culture war shit, about how these people are so degenerative. So he definitely has in his eyes who the enemies are.
Sorry to interrupt, but that's interesting because that's like a very American or like actually Westoid condition, right? Is that you have profound radicalism when it comes to the most trivial shit on the planet. Okay, like profoundly radical opinions on things that are just purely culture war stuff. Now, in terms of like your own like identity, right? So like a right-wing chud freaking out about trans, right? Like this, their own personal opinions, like whatever hypothetical chud thinks about trans people, to me, I don't care. Now, how that is turned into a psyop in which millions of people share that irrational anxiety that like, oh man, this guy in a dress is going to come and murder me in the bathroom. Like that's like what they think. And like when millions of people repeat it ad nauseum and they circulate it and they create this kind of like monster out of it with their anxieties, like that's a psyop. Like that's like vaccines, the vaccine stuff, like that was a psyop. Like that, like this stuff is cooked up, or it's discovered somewhere and amplified by actors, some state actors, some non-state actors, sometimes both, probably oftentimes both, in the US, because there's just so much money and it doesn't take much to manipulate media. Like the whole operation of Twitter is just money laundering now, right? Like Elon bought it with Saudi money. They launder $7 accounts through it. You can just invent all kinds of $7 accounts. Like most of the users are bots, even those blue check marks. Like they don't have to be real people. You think Twitter's going to check? Like they're going to do a passport check on like name, bunch of numbers? like they're not going to do that. So it's just all they care is the $7, and you multiply that by millions of users. That's a potent like money laundering Yeah, and like this is what the what capitalism around us circulates as, like the economy is just a class of people passing money back and forth to each other, and meanwhile working together in group projects like it's grade 6 to destroy the planet and like suck out more of its resources, which is like what Syria was, which like all kinds of wars have been cooked up by these people for the planet. And oftentimes these nodes run through the entity, right? Like if there's some skullduggery afoot, like Zionists got their fucking greedy little fingers in it, right? And so like all of this is to say, like the culture war shit is so, like getting people to get over culture war stuff is so hard. Like it is so hard. This culture war stuff is so deeply ingrained into their bones. Like yesterday, I was having like a productive with my neighbors. I live with Chuds. God bless them. I prefer the Chuds, by the way, to the Libs. Okay, I lived with a lot of Libs in my life. I prefer these Chuds. These Chuds will move like the earth for you. Literally, in my case, they like have tractors. They come and do shit for you for free. Because if you just ask them, and that's it. And whereas Libs will be like, I don't know, I gotta go to my, little meeting. So I was having a conversation with the Chud, and somehow like the topic of 9/11 came up, and he was like, oh yeah, that was like a planned demolition. I was like, oh yeah, here we go, awesome. And then we just did a hop, skip, and a jump into flat earthism. I was like, oh god, now we're here. And that's what he got more excited about. And I was like, no, but I had you. And then at the end, I was like, can we just bond over 9/11 being an inside job? Can we just do that? I want us to do that. And so like that was an interesting moment for me where I was like, oh, finally, like we can make some progress. Like I can show them. I was like, yeah, 9/11, it was just for Israel. Like it helped them a lot. Like, come on. And like he was into it. And then he got bored with that and moved to flat earth. And so like that. And then I realized like, oh, I was just doing culture war with him. Like I was just doing his, like, these are skirmishes on the culture war front that these guys fight. And it's not unfortunately, it's not part of like a larger analysis that like correctly identifies like the sources of antagonism in their lives and also in like the wider world. And so like, it's that moment where you have to be like, I did that episode with Nick on They Live. And Nick pointed this out. I had never seen it before, like this amazing John Carpenter movie. But like that 10-minute fight scene, like that's you trying to take people out of ideology. Like that's like our job fighting with people. Like we are Rowdy Piper, and Keith David is our hypothetical listener. And getting Keith David on our side is like a huge boost. Unfortunately, Keith David had to shaheed himself in a very ignoble way to get us that message. And Roddy Piper gets all the credit at the end, and he gets like the last scene. And poor Keith David like dies ignominiously, quietly. Even though like without him, he could have never gotten that far. But like that's us. Like we have to find our Keith Davids, and we have to like wrestle them into like, guys, it's one big psyop. Like that's been my thing with Syria. With Syria, it's always that wrestling match. It's like, and especially with pro-Palestine Muslims, especially Sunni Muslims, of course. Especially with them, it's that wrestling match. And I've had guests where like they kind of vibe with me, and then Syria comes up and you can just see like, oh, or same, and it's usually the same thing with Iran too. And yeah, like that wrestling match is like the story of our lives. Unfortunately, now we've monetized that match, and like this WWF that we have is like, sustaining our careers, and there's an audience for this. And if anything, it's like partly it's because the mainstream libs leave us this avenue. Right? Like they leave out this realm of discussion that they never take up. So people who are like the small minority of people who are interested in this stuff, they have no choice but to come to us weirdos.
Sina, I think you just answered our question on how we reach millions. We need more kayfabe, I think.
Yes,
So I did want to say something just in response to both of your comments and the question that Alex asked, and then I'll be happy to pass it over to Adnan, who I'm sure has some great thoughts on this as well. But part of what you touch on in that story, Sina, is the problems with conspiracism, right? The problems with kind of conspiratorial thinking, right? And it is not. I appreciate the ways like folks like Orasami Burton talk about conspiracy to say, look, conspiracies do happen all the time. Like it's a very mundane thing. It only requires a few of us to get together and decide that we're going to do something, right? And so that actual activity is fairly mundane and it does absolutely exist. But there's a form of thinking, right, which we might call conspiracism, which seeks to always find these individual you know evil actors, right, who are colluding together to get one over on people. And this is unfortunately not a good replacement for like class analysis, right? Or an analysis of how global capitalism functions and the role of these different countries and their elites, right, into this system. And how their actions follow from this through a kind of material analysis. And that is the problem, right? Is that the same guy who might be with you willing to go down the road on like who benefited from 9/11 the most, right, is going to be looking to dig into a bunch of other, conspiratorial things, many of which will be quite wacky, right? And usually racists, often anti-Semitic, like all of these kind of things. Um, and I think that, and anti-immigrant, right? All of those things that you both were talking about who do people think their enemies are, right? And I mean, film, popular culture and, mainstream news, whether it's liberal or conservative, they feed this stuff all the time. There's a very weird story going around right now that is about a Ukrainian refugee who was stabbed on a bus in Charlotte. And part of me is like, why is this it was a national, it ran on CBS this morning today, national news.
Barry
I'm sure
Weiss's
ran
CBS News. Yeah.
Yeah, Barry Weiss, right? And it also, was trending yesterday on Twitter, right, with a bunch of chuds, as you say, Sina, and both right wing and liberal folks like sharing this. Why is no one talking about this? And it's so strange because I mean, this woman was stabbed on the bus. Horrific thing. The person who stabbed her clearly didn't know that she was a Ukrainian refugee, right? It's an individual act of violence that happened on a bus that happens every freaking day in this genocidal settler colony that called the US, right? This empire. People are The violence occurs constantly, right? Like we all know, we all live in city, well, at least like Mtume and I live in cities. I don't know where you two are, but like and in Canada it's not as common as it is in the US for sure. But in Philly, in New York, right? But that becomes this is also part of the culture war that's going on right now in the United States, right? Is this idea of sending in the National Guard to all of these cities based on this idea, again promoted in media over decades long, that cities are these places where it is just so dangerous to walk down the street, to get on the subway, or to walk through certain neighborhoods, you know n- none of which, I mean, I've lived in cities for the last 20 years or so of my life and have never had, not to say that it can't I know people that bad things have happened to, of course, but I've never had like a bad interaction like that where I actually was like even if that fearful, let alone was like, oh crap, like I'm about to get stabbed or shot or something like that, right? And so that's a whole fantasy too. So anyways, I just wanted to say that question of who your enemies are, I think it's very important to try to drive people to some kind of analysis that will also help them understand that their enemies run their media and that their enemies want them to have a perception of this idea that other groups of people are their enemies, so that we don't focus on the people who are actually in charge in this country and elsewhere.
It's just the degree to which Americans specifically are like the most intensely propagandized people on the planet. I don't think like we really get it. Like even the psyops are like even like the whole alien conspiracy shit. Why is it that like 99% of like alien sightings are in the US? Like aliens are obsessed with America? Is that really what it is? Like aliens are like middle class, like French tourists from like a suburb outside of Paris. They only want to go to the US. Like really? I don't know. Yeah, the
The
conspiratorial
American
element. Go ahead.
exceptional, I mean, it's like where world history happens. So, like, of course, if an alien is going to go somewhere where whatever's going on is important, they would come to the United States in some suburb or, someplace in Nevada. So it's again, it's part of that projection, probably you could say, of some aspect. I mean, this is something maybe you will take up on the series. I'm sure there are a lot of good alien, 80s movies about UFOs and so on. I mean, and also, like what that says about the kind of self-projection of US empire, that it's not even just global importance, but cosmic importance. The universe pays attention to what happens in the United States. But, this thing about the apolitical, I mean, my first flip response was going to be that it is the apolitical who is the enemy, because of its obfuscation of the status quo. At least, like the people Sina was talking about, you can start to have a genuine political conversation. It may go veering off into like these conspiracy theories and blind alleys where you subordinate structural and materialist analysis for these, individualized kind of sense of morality. Like that's definitely possible, but at least you could have a political conversation, right? So I guess I wonder, my other thought here about that is, who is apolitical and who claims that they are apolitical in these current circumstances? And it certainly requires, it's very selective about what counts as politics. Many people who we would think, who would say, well, like I'm not really political, meaning that they don't want to talk about, say, matters of consequence and importance like war and peace, genocide, and what you could do against it, or class, struggle and corporate power in our society and culture. That very often they are very partisan, in the sense that they want you to vote, Democrat, or they think that Trump is terrible. But a lot of those people who eschew that kind of electoral politics in democracy are the people who think of themselves as apolitical because, what you think is politics doesn't count as politics for them. Or they think that what counts as politics is a grievance that you have. And there are people who don't have that many grievances. Like why would they? That's the messy part, of the people who have a grievance, whether it's a right-wing culture war grievance that, white identity, we are, becoming, white, the white male is a, on the endangered species list kind of ressentiment, on the one hand, or, the left wing, kind of critique of the world of capitalism, or the identitarian, politics that is being dismissed because it raises the uncomfortable possibility that racism persists in the post-Obama world. Like these kinds of things are how people structure what it means to be apolitical. And it just is quarantining aspects of the reality of the world and the society we live in. I mean, only some people can afford to be so apolitical, because politics is actually about the distribution of power and the contest, of the world. And if they're in a position where they don't want to recognize those contests because they have a privileged and safe position, so they imagine, they can afford to characterize themselves as apolitical in the same way that scholarship and journalism want to position themselves, if they are establishmentarian, as objective, right? As like inhabiting this space where we can take things on the basis of reason. All the rest of you who are complaining or fighting or struggling, that's politics, is the messy sort of thing, because you have an interest that actually invalidates your position. You're not in the norm, the mainstream, and the privileged position that we inhabit of the apolitical or the objective or the professional, etc., is actually a political claim. And so in a way, I would say the problem, the enemy, is the apolitical, because if you're not actually consciously contesting and identifying with solidarity for justice and equality and these genuine kind of values, then you're inhabiting kind of the position that we have to actually take down and change and confront. So maybe that's what I would say to the person who thinks that they're apolitical, is that you're basically the problem, is because if you're a human, you need to actually be engaged in the struggle to make the world possible for human life, like equitable, just, sustainable human life. Like that's like what it means to be human, is working to recognize and validate that equally for everybody. And if you're not going to do anything about it and just say that you're apolitical, you're actually the enemy. But that's not a way to recruit friends. And we need friends. We need people to be, so like you might want to try.
So don't be too political.
Try some of this analysis without naming them the enemy. But, that's I think, that's what Sina said when he said that he can't stand the liberals, kind of almost the most, is because they have this frustrating position, of inhabiting this space where they don't have to risk anything, or they don't have to get involved in these contestations unless it's their choice that, very curated and narrow. This is something that I'm willing to kind of talk about, but otherwise I'm inhabiting a different kind of space where I'm not called or required to be accountable or to risk anything. But I think it's also a big issue for those in the culture industry. So I was very interested with what Matume you were saying, is like the art world, is like, oh well, that's a political film, means that it's like not worth taking seriously on aesthetic or intellectual, artistic grounds because it's political. It's again the same as the apolitical, the objective. So it's like also the art, that standard and theory of value has to be confronted.
Yeah, unless it's calling the global South degenerate.
Yes. Well, then
it's high art.
That's right.
Then it's like super like the high art, and especially if it's someone who's from one of those nations, whether historically or recently left, right? It becomes like the high art piece, like this is like the highest level of art. But if someone made a revolutionary anti-imperialist piece, I know one of the criticisms you often hear about like maybe like revolutionary Cuban films is like they're just so politically like in front, and we don't know if we really need to be like that. That's not the highest level of art, just to be that politically in front. And I'm like, Saving Private Ryan isn't politically in front. Like, what the hell are you talking about? Like, it's just ridiculous. It doesn't add up in the interesting thing with liberalism to me is I also think there is a level with these liberals that they know that if we do get what we want and Palestine is free, that is actually a loss of liberalism, of the liberal life that they have. And I think a lot of them are having, if they're not having it in the front of their brain, I think a lot of them are having it in the middle of their brain or at most the back of their brain. They're struggling with that because they know that the world fundamentally changes, and they know that where they sit in the social order will have to maneuver. You know, like I think of people that I know who are either apolitical or in this kind of, you know, well, Israel has a right to defend itself position, but the genocide is too far type position. I think about them in a sense that they can't reconcile with the fact that they're going to lose the situation that they have now. So I feel like a lot of them are like last gasping, you know, they're going to more Taylor Swift concerts, you know, they're going to more football and basketball games because they kind of like know that this might not be it anymore. Like and they're sad. They're sad that they're kind of like liberal order in the metropolis is like coming to an end. They're losing a reality as well. And it's like really messing with them, but they don't confront. They go to therapy to be petted and told that, you know, well, you know, if you just do self-care, everything will be all right. And, you know, you can't change the world, so just react to it. Yes, go buy that handbag if it makes you feel a little bit better, right? Right. They're kind of
live your best life.
Live your best life, right? And go watch these movies and sit within culture. I think the really pernicious thing, and this goes to like the cultural commentators, is that, you know, I find it very, very odd that some of these cultural commentators think they can talk about culture and like not talk about Gaza at all. It's just wild to me. I'll say one thing, and even act like it's principled. Right? Like, I don't know if y'all saw the clip going around. LL Cool J last night at the VMAs said that this is where we let politics like leave for the night. He said that last night. I don't think he said politics. He said something like, this is like, he didn't say the word politics, but he suggested that like all the issues, you know, it goes away for the VMAs night. We could go back to that later. But
Apex
like that's
said knock you out.
Well, that's really what it was.
So
but like,
pathetic.
I'll say one last thing. It's the same mentality. I think these people, they think that these culture commentators think that, well, my job is to give people an escape. But then that just shows you your cultural commentary is pretty inert. It's really not in conversation with society at all.
I mean, here's the thing. Americans don't see anything from the world. They don't look at the world. They don't like here's a wider question. Actually, we need to have Lara on to talk about this. But like, and I always bring this up, but like the actual images radicalize you. Like when you see the baby with like the guts spilling out, like when you see like the holes through people, when you see like the cruelty of this Zionist machine, like you get radicalized. You see the truth. Like it is it's a revelation, to use, you know, like to see this stuff. But the thing is, those images preceded Gaza. They preceded the genocide in Gaza, right? They were available everywhere for see. Like starving Yemeni babies didn't crack our timeline. I mean, Palestinians do now much more than Yemenis ever did. And I don't say that to begrudge Palestinians at all. I'm not saying they have some privileged position, but it's only because they've built up this media infrastructure in the West that passes these images on. Whereas Yemenis didn't benefit from that in 2015. So it was just like one corner of the internet, mostly Shia Muslims, really. And talking about Yemen, showing the pictures, that kind of thing. And like people, when they talk about starvation campaigns, like they leave out Yemen, you know, like it was 5 years ago. Like my podcast was on during the starvation of Yemen. Like my podcast is as old as that. So this is not, I think the root of this is most of our society is not prepared to see these images emotionally, politically, whatever. Like they're not prepared. And in fact, I think the violence of Hollywood, and I've said this before, but I'm saying more explicitly, is that I think it prepares you to not see that stuff. I think it prepares you. It displaces that kind of the knowledge. Like, you know, that like those images from that Steven Seagal movie are real in a real place. Like those bombing images, like those are real. It's just here they're put in your face for your aesthetic pleasure and for cultural dominance, and more than likely for some sort of psychological operation that helps American imperialism in one way or another, right? Like whatever, Black Hawk Down, whatever, Zero Dark 30. Like, the American imperial machine is so powerful. It does all these crimes around the world, and then it takes that violence, jams it into a machine called Hollywood, and it comes out like chicken nuggets, right? Where they put the boy chicks into those machines. That's your chicken nugget, right? So America takes this like immense imperial violence, it puts it into the Hollywood chicken nugget machine, and it comes out as movies. Right. And you're like, you sit and you dip them into more chicken nugget sauce, and you're happy, and you debate the meaning of the chicken nuggets. And it's like the center of your life. And I want to know when the next chicken nugget is coming. Right. Like, this is the American political brain in action. Like, it's American. Like, and there's other retrograde versions of it in other Anglophone countries, but I lived in the US, okay? I experienced this machine firsthand, okay? All of you are Americans in one way or another too. So you know this. Like, there is no more totalizing media machine, because you turn off the TV and the media keeps going. Like, it really, like, They Live is like a document that looks into, like, it is everywhere. It's obey, it's everything. And then it's so inculcated that people then do it for you. Like, they do it for the ruling class. They police you. They tell you, don't talk about that. LL Cool J says, don't talk about this. Don't bring this up. Like, don't cause any, don't ruffle our feathers here. Like, so there's this ingrained sense of, don't bring this thing up. Right. And what's amazing is that we are the children who were raised with all that liberal pablum about never again. Right. It turned out to be what was a very serious thing. Right. Which was the genocide in Europe between 1940 and 1945. Right. One of many genocides, mind you, but it's a very serious thing. They then turned it into a psyop, which generated basically legitimacy points for Zionists, in the sense of, oh, Israel exists because Holocaust, right? And that was like this ironclad, and like Steven Spielberg was part of it, and like there's a whole, and he was just one of the generations. This has been a generational task of Zionists. And now we are never again. This is never again is now. And that entire apparatus has gone into silent mode. And if anything, they're helping, right? Like, the Auschwitz Museum is like openly Zionist, right? Like, that's like their account is just openly Zionist chuds, you know, like, that's it. And so I think that one way to crack that is to forcibly show people the violence. Like, that's, I don't know. I think, like, if you hack that Jumbotron at that football game, and you just hack it with my Twitter feed, boy, you're going to have some radicalized people leaving that stadium. Like, if you have to force that. And I would say, if people are out there, not to suggest to do anything illegal, because that would be illegal, that this is an avenue, that like finding creative ways to show the violence of this entity, which works so assiduously to hide it, that's your job. That's at least that's the one thing you can do. You can put posters around campus. You can just you can show disturbing things, like disturb people. It's okay. You don't have to be mindful of their feelings. Like, disturb them. Just straight up disturb them. It's okay. It's not illegal. Zionists will pretend it's illegal, but it's not. And cops are lazy. They won't actually arrest you. Like, 9 times out of 10, they might. But like, if you're smart about it, you probably won't get into trouble. And it doesn't cost you anything to disturb these people, because their mental equanimity, like that ability to exist and like go to their favorite store, like, you ruin that for them, and that's their life. Like that's their political essence of like, oh, that's like the, oh, if Hillary were in power, we'd be at brunch right now kind of lib. And that sentiment captures their political consciousness so perfectly. Like I'm not a like, oh, let's fetishize signs at a protest, because those are psyops too sometimes. Remember all those signs at WWF events? They gave them out to people. Okay, they would give those signs out to people like it's fake, it's kayfabe. Okay, so like that, I'm not like hey, look at this amazing sign at a protest. Oh my God, we're making some sort of headway. I don't do that, but that one was so true that it was such like a perfect encapsulation of the fickleness of the liberal brain and their political passions, that you can just switch them on if their political masters tell them to be worried about Bosnia, they're worried about Bosnia. If they're worried about Syria, they're worried about Syria. And it just works. And when they don't push the button, which is now, and they push another button called shut the fuck up, right? Then that works even better. Right? Like that works even better. So this is the task of our time, is to take on liberals. The chuds, whatever. It's really the libs. It's honestly, these are the powerful forces. Like if we go to Rachel Maddow's like Twitter account, we'll see some immense liberal magic at play. Because this is how they work. And so I don't know. That's my thing. Put the violence in front of them.
Thank you, Sina. All I will say is you have to come on Imperial 80s in October when we're doing horror films so that we can get a version of that rant, while we talk about Nightmare on Elm Street or something like that. So, for sure. And we will have Adnan on. He's going to join us when we do Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade also. So looking forward to that as well. But Muhammad, let's see, where are we at? Doing well. Thanks for everybody for all of the contributions today. I think, Sina, we should do another one. Maybe, I don't know, maybe Friday or maybe another day, and we should do one on Lifeline for Gaza, where we just, because that one you can get a lot of campaigns, and we can just like play a game with our viewers, like how many of these
that's a good point.
can we turn from green to red or whatever,
I'm down.
So, but thank you everybody for contributing. I did want to bring up one thing too, in kind of talking about this. It kind of threads some of these needles that's not even a thing. Yeah, it is threading needles. Okay. That threads some of the needles that we've been talking about, which or threads the needle, right, of this conversation, I guess we could say. So I have a episode coming out with Karina Mullen, great anti-imperialist scholar who's been fired from CUNY for her organizing with students there and everything, and her analysis. But she's a part of the Anti-Imperialist Scholars Collective, and so she wrote a piece, and there's a bunch. They just put out their second issue, which is a Black August issue, but this was from the first issue in July. Zionism, Imperialism, and the Struggle Against Global Fascism, Palestine as the Hornet's Nest of U.S. Empire. It's really good, but I just wanted to kind of pull into like one little section of this where she talks about analyzing and resisting the international fascist counter-revolution. And she works from George Jackson's analysis of fascism in Blood in My Eye, but she talks about how people, don't often recognize that in George Jackson's work, he really focused on the international character of fascism, right? Not just looking at it as a kind of national, idea of how to rule over people, right? But as an as basically a function of the capitalist system in crisis on an international scale. And I think this touches a little bit on perhaps how, we might, if we're good organizers, right, how we might connect in with some of the liberals, to this extent, to try to deepen their analysis, is because, as you said, I think it was Was it you, Mtume, who was talking about them, going to the last movies, or that was you, Sina? I can't remember who was talking about like enjoying the last. It was you, Mtume. Yeah, this point about like going out to, go to Taylor Swift and all of this stuff. Is that you're right. I think that there is some sense among liberals, right, that the liberal order is dying, right? They recognize, right, that okay, they had this little brief period of Joe Biden who they could pretend was their old grandpa, and had all those nice pictures with Obama in the aviator classes during Obama's presidency, right? Meanwhile, not wanting to talk about the genocide, right, that he's committing. But now they have Trump again, right? And, we don't, I think they have some sense that, we don't know when the Trump 2.0 era will end, right? And you see these, these attacks on cities, you see the ICE, raids and everything else. And I do think that there is a sense for them that their version of US capitalism, and the kind of protections that they had under the old liberal order are fragile, right, in this moment. And I think helping them connect that fragility into an understanding of global fascism, right, and being able to see that this is not just fascism is not Trump, right? This is the most difficult argument that we've all had to have, right? Is that Trump is not just, yes, Trump is a fascist, right? But he is not the representative and the guarantor of fascism within the United States, right? That this is a product of the capitalist system at this declining, kind of crisis state that it is in, as US imperialism is going down, right? And this is really the connections that I'm not doing it as eloquently at all as Karina does in her piece or in the conversation that we'll put out later this week. But, she's saying, look, like there is no going back from this for US empire. Like it is full decline now, right? It is in a kind of death spiral. And part of the reason that it is going so hard to support this genocide in Gaza is because it really feels itself in a death spiral. And, it's trying to shore up what has been a very strong, fascistic ally of it for a very long time. And it worries about all of those things Mtume was talking about in terms of, Western civilization, right, might fall, right? This again to connect into also Adnan's work around the kind of civilizational project that Zionism is deeply connected into. And so I urge people to check out the Anti-Imperialist Scholars Collective and their work, and also specifically that piece from Karina Mullen. But yeah, I mean, I think that's the thing, is that this is really connected. I mean, there is the most grotesque form of fascism that we're watching unfold in Gaza, right? That people in Gaza are resisting with, in their sandals and their track suits and with their arms, right? But there is obviously all kinds of symptoms of this, cropping up all over the imperial core at this point as well. And it's not something that anyone is going to escape in some form or another.
Yeah, because I think the other thing we're still fighting is, and as Cold War children, I think all of us, right, probably the authoritarian thesis, right, that what makes Trump a fascist is his authoritarianism, so that you can then put him in the lines of Hitler, but also Stalin, so forth and so on. And we're still living in that kind of fantasy world that fascism has nothing to do with capitalism, right? And it just shows that people have not done the reading. They have not read the Walter Rodneys, the Aimé Césaires. The list goes on and on and on, who have shown us that fascism is a necessary kind of Janus face that exists when capitalism needs to, get itself together in a particular way. And that's why George, that makes me excited that using George Jackson's analysis, because it's funny. I went to a a couple of like Western Marxists said, who were kind of discussing not George Jackson. That was the problem. They were discussing fascism, and I threw George in there, and none of them had ever read it, right? And they kind of immediately like dismissed it as like anything truly relevant, right? Which I think just kind of goes to a kind of, a statement on like the global order of theory and who gets to be, within there. But that's like, I'm with you, Jay. Like this, there is a way that, as I agree with Sina, like the liberals in this way are the issue, right? But then also like there's these like, we still have the Western Marxists who also want liberalism. They still think that, you see these big push. I mean, I'm glad y'all took a slap at Jacobin. Jacobin is one of those places that's really believing in, I think it's, was it McManus is into this kind of liberal socialism thing, which, has so much problems. And I've never seen them have really good faith conversations with people who would really push back on that. Like they won't. They kind of like talk to people from afar, but they won't really get into a heavy debate, right, on those kinds of issues. But yeah, I mean, I'm just saying all this to agree. But this authoritarian thing, right, that we have an authoritarian in presidency, and that's the issue. It's not capitalism, and it's not that capitalism, when it's dying, needs to resort to a fascistic, whether it's state or mode or whatever you want to call it, right? That it's a necessary piece, and if you look at it historically, that's always what's happened when the fascistic ends come out, and they always come out. That's the other thing, is like this idea that like the fascism just came back, right? What, I guess Trump's been in 6-8 months now, or almost a year, right? It's come now. It's not been something that's, was that Biden didn't use when committing genocide against the Palestinian people and all types of other stuff, the carceral system. I mean, that's essentially George's thesis, right? That it's here, it's already here, it exists, right? It's used, right? And you can really connect that to Césaire, because he's saying like, look, like it's already was used, right? It was used against the colonial people. So like this the thing, it's used in pockets and around. So stop acting like when some guy comes in and he's authoritarian, right, that he is the example of fascism. But it just shows that people don't really quite understand what they're talking about.
Yeah, and like, that's such an important point about the internationalism of fascism, because it can be confusing because it's framed principally within an ultranationalist language, right? Political language, restoration of the nation, to our past glories. So it seems like almost a contradiction to think about it as an internationalist movement. It's like a bunch of nationalists, and they care about their nation and their people and its return to glory and so on. However, what we've seen is that, there was the Axis during World War II. They recognized some affiliations and connections and were able to collaborate. So even if you go back to the classic history of thinking about fascism and the kind of case examples, I mean, they could definitely see some sort of, relationship between these far right ultranationalist type of ideologies together in imperialism and racism, because that's actually what holds them together, right? As the Césaire point. I mean, I love that part of, in fact, actually, it's almost always perpetually on my, desk here, Discourse on Colonialism, the new translation and edition with the wonderful Robin Kelly's, words at the preface, and where, he's basically put his finger on something that's very important to recognize, that colonialism and racism are basically twin phenomena. In fact, it's actually maybe a redundancy to talk about racism as if it's just a phenomenon of, society within like the settler colony in North America, in Europe, etc., and colonial societies, because those are predicated entirely, as Fanon showed us too, on racism. And so there's really symmetry between these things. And just as colonialism could be internationalist, you had all these different nation states, but they had rivalries, but they also understood that when there was an effort to decolonize, that they actually had to reinforce and shore one up, because the project of Western supremacy, even if it expressed itself in separate colonial states and colonial projects was one that was integrated, together. And so I think we really do need to analyze, like, what's internationalist about this fascist moment. If you look and see the far right politics of Europe, I mean, it's, you've got the Orbans, you've got Alternative for Deutschland, emerging as a powerful political force. You have, the same in France. And what was Brexit and Reform UK other than a politics of anti-immigrant, you know, Islamophobia, as a real kind of organizing principle of this. And so I really, that's such an important point, and I really appreciate, George Jackson having been, like a lot of the Black radical tradition, recognizing this very early on, which is why we need to uplift them as theoreticians for our contemporary movements. I mean, who was a better critique of global white supremacy and the international basis of it, and who linked the cause for Black freedom in the United States with the anti-colonial movements in Africa better than Malcolm X? Like, this is what made him dangerous. This is why, how he gets assassinated. This is why he becomes anathema. As long as he's just talking about, kind of a certain form of Black nationalism, yes, it can be seen as radical and problematic and scary, for a lot of like white society. But it's when he linked that struggle with a global struggle for freedom against colonialism and imperialism, that's when it became such a real problem. And this is the problem with some of this kind of left, DSA left or liberal socialism, is that you cannot oppose the international fascist order if you take on a politics of left nationalism and don't, kind of embrace the anti-colonial struggles that are taking, place now. I want to read that book. There's too much to read, so I do want to read, McManus's book, Liberal Socialism, just to find out how you put these things together, because I would agree that in the end, socialism is supposed to provide us with the goods that we now mistakenly believe liberalism has a right to claim, freedom, democracy, all this stuff. The point of socialism, however, is that without a materialist analysis, these like fake concepts have no reality, and they are actually confusing to people and create contradictions. And it's only when you actually create justice and equality on a material level in society that people can actually be free, that people can actually have what we think of as a democracy, which is not, just a kind of narrow system of organizing politics mechanistically, the bourgeois revolution, of liberal order, of democratic representative politics. But, real democracy is when people have, a stake in the decisions and the organizing of their society. And that only happens, when you have economic democracy and all these other. So I'm a little curious, like, is this, just an attempt to domesticate or defang the sort of anti-imperialist left, by creating this sort of a value of like, and a rationale and a theoretical underpinning for some kind of concept of reconciling liberalism with socialism in this sort of way, rather than saying you need revolution, you need to change all these conditions, and then you will have liberal, experience. You'll have freedom. You'll have all of those things, which is how I see it. So I don't see liberalism. I don't see liberal ideals themselves as the enemy. It's just that, liberals promote those over the actual conditions that might make those values actually possible. That's the problem here. So of course there's no problem, like in the end, that's what we want to have. So if that's what you're saying, well, then how do we get there? It's only through revolutionary, transformation. If you're trying to say, oh, there's a way that we have to domesticate our revolutionary politics to make peace with liberalism as a political ideology in the context of the societies we're living in, well, then, that's just not socialism.
Hell yeah, none.
Yeah, bars, man. Yeah, absolutely. No, that was great. I I'll first of all, let's plug one more time Mohammed's Chuffed account, which I haven't I haven't fully been able to keep up, but folks have been great. Like, Sina, do you have some sense of how much folks have given today?
I think it's over 2,200. I think more.
Wow,
I think it's amazing. I'm so touched. You guys made
that's
my
awesome.
day, and I'm waiting for him to come online. Tell
Um,
him.
a couple other things I did want to plug just quickly. So, and folks, you know, I mean, this is a communal live stream, so feel free to plug other stuff that you all are connected to as well. But first, Gorilla History has an episode which is a mini series, and maybe Adnan, you could say a little bit about this with Ali Kadri. And I definitely encourage. I mean, first of all, Karina Mullen's analysis in the piece I shared is very influenced by Ali Kadri's work. I've been influenced by it as well as many others. And I also just wanted to plug related to that. We are doing a study group on Patreon for our Patreon members, for our patrons, I guess you say, for millennials. So I did put a link to that study group in the show description. It's a fairly significant undertaking. We're going to do 14 sessions over like a 17-week period. We take a couple of weeks off. But we're going to read about 40 pages a week, basically, because it's a decently long book. But it's really, really good. And we do our study groups on Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Eastern time. So I know for some folks that's not feasible because they're in, time zones where that's like 3 a.m. or whatever, unfortunately. But we haven't figured out how to solve that problem yet. So, but it's great. We'll have a lot of really, folks who are in movements, scholars, grad students. Tume signed up for it. So we'll have a lot of great folks that are there. We basically break out into small groups and just discuss the reading for about 90 minutes a week. And, that's kind of the scope of it, but it'll be a really informative, group. And it's always great to be in study with folks. So there are about 55 spots left at this point. So there's still space. You do have to be a Patreon or a patron of the show, or for folks who just cannot afford that for, real reasons, we do waive it, or other folks step in and sponsor folks. So anyway, the details on that are in the show description if people are interested in that as well. Just wanted to share that. Other than that, I have a couple of audio podcasts that we're going to put out this week. We may do another, maybe if Friday works for you, Sina, maybe we'll do another live stream like this towards the end of the week. And do something for Lifeline for Gaza and focus on that. But yeah, there's not a lot else on our plate this week. Go ahead.
Do it at 7 p.m. and I will join. It'll be after office hours, and I'll just switch over from office hours at 5 p.m. and go on for a fundraiser for Lifeline and try and bring my, audience over to that, or we can start it at, kind of 6:30 and just merge, into that. So I think that's very important. I really appreciate doing that. I'm a little concerned about this is all we can do. It's so disturbing because we believe in collective solutions. And, in some ways, we're just creating inflation because of some people will have some, have money, and we want them to survive, but they've created a black market type situation because of this deliberate policy of blocking aid and only letting like these gangs, so destroying the distribution system of UNRWA and of other kind of established organizations that have their processes. It is under the control of these Yasser Abu Shabab types. And this is what Israel wants, is like the breakdown of that solidaristic, kind of organized society that has been resisting by creating such extreme conditions that it, perverts the whole, society, that they just have to compete, to try and survive within this system. So we're going to do that. We must do that. We have to help, especially the ones that have received, less. And we should do that for Lifeline for Gaza and try and bring up some of those. But we have to put an end to this. We can't. We're trying, right? But we have to figure out ways to do that, because this is not really the way we want to be supporting our comrades, our friends, our brothers and sisters in Gaza. But do come, do be generous. I'd love to see that. Also, you can check out, as I just already plugged, office hours beforehand. I'm going to be talking about, Manifest Empire, U.S. and Latin America, with favorite of the Tanky World, Professor Alex Avina. And, we'll be looking at kind of the global situation, but also specifically, reactions and responses to the pink tide, narco terrorists in Venezuela, all this kind of stuff, in this kind of neo-Monroe doctrine pivot to Latin America, because they can't sustain the confrontation with China, and the wars in West Asia are sapping the U.S. empire that's crumbling. So it seems like there might be a conscious readjustment, and Pete Hegseth even mentioned this. So we're going to look, like a few months ago, that we're going to have to really focus in the regions where we have, possibility to try and exercise hegemony. So we'll look at that. And I just want people to also be aware that next Sunday we'll be doing struggle session, which is like this, a kind of live stream panel. And again, to try and impel us towards some kind of conscious action as we interpret the world and analyze the world, but do so, as Marx, once advised, not as the philosophers did, but actually to try and change it. So, be prepared for that. And hopefully I'll see people there. And in the meantime, let's remember our political prisoners and support Palestine action, and all the people who are putting their, taking risks to try and stop this genocide. And I will just say about the Ali Qadri, series that we're doing on guerrilla history, is that I'm actually going to sign up. And I saw that before and said, oh, I should sign up for this accumulation of waste and really study it with people, because I think Ali Qadri has been doing some of the most important and influential analysis on the geopolitical economy of this stage of capitalism that we're in. And, since we do need to understand the world in order to change it. So let's do that. And I'm looking forward to, I don't know if I'll be able to attend all 17 weeks, but I plan to, attend and support it as much as I can. I think people should join it. It'll be a great conversation.
14 weeks, fortunately.
14,
not 17.
okay,
So 14 over 17. So we're
Over
not doing a couple of weeks. Yeah.
But if you want a little preview to get you interested, if you haven't heard of Ali Qadri, we do have a couple audio podcast episodes. One has already come out. The next one should be out any minute, this week or so. And that'll give you a sense of why you should actually study his work. And a study group is the best way to do it. I had started a Capital, during the pandemic, Capital Volume 1, and we ended up managing to get through Volume 2 during it, before we all got so tired reading these mountainous things. But doing it with people is just so much better. Make it a comradely community of support, so that you're reading and studying together, and then actually maybe you might work together, take action together.
Yeah. Go ahead, Mtumi.
Yeah, I agree on the collective study. We did accumulation on a world scale through Millenials, and that was really helpful to get through that, especially when the book hits those moments where you really have to dig. Jay's making that face. It was great, to have people to lean on and to be in comradely discussion with and learn a lot. It was really helpful. And shout out. I did listen to the first of the Ali Qadri episodes in Guerrilla History. Really, really great stuff. I was really, really excited to hear how that keeps going. Within our gates this week, I have an episode coming out with Samantha Youssef, who's been featured on Jay's show, also on Renee Johnston. We did a couple collective things. We take a tour, a kind of, I think, parallel discussion of our trainings as artists within the imperial industry, and our various epistemological breaks that have happened within it. And it's a really strong conversation. I was actually editing it last night, and it's really exciting. Be out end of the week. If you're on my Patreon, be out Wednesday, and then on the regular podcast will be out Friday. To check that out. And in general, within our gates, in October and through November and December, are going to be dealing with a lot more third cinema. I have some guests that I'm coming up with, a lot more 60s, 70s films, and also kind of going through more of the scholarship that came through that, as I'm prepping for a few talks that I'm kind of giving around that period, and also how those things kind of reflect now. Then also Imperial 80s, we are digging through these very interesting things. We just did the Three Amigos with Alex Savina, which was so interesting to kind of revisit that. And September we have some really, really exciting stuff, I think, and really exciting guests. And then October we'll be stepping into some horror stuff, so it's gonna be really, really exciting. But yeah, check out the Patreon for me within our gates, or M2, maybe we can put it somewhere. And that's what I got coming. And I hope to be in further conversation with y'all too. Again, Sina and Adnan, been a pleasure. I do have to actually run. I gotta get on a plane in the evening tonight, so I gotta get myself ready to do a few things. So yeah.
Thanks, man.
Thanks so much for stopping by. Appreciate you coming through, and it was great to have you join us in this airing of Grievances today.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, and I'm sure we could air a whole lot more, but
there will be time.
In life.
Yeah, no, thanks. I know I pulled them too, and we did not do Imperial 80s today. Like Monday is kind of the day we're gonna try to do them, and he was like, I'm traveling, but I still sent him this and was like, hey, jump on. And so
no, it's good. Man. This will definitely help me for my trip. This is like the good leveler, but hopefully no one in customs is looking at it. So
all right. Sina, you got anything else coming up that you want to plug?
Well, no, I thank everyone. It's I was calculating in Canadian dollars earlier. Now we're just about to crack $2,000 US. So it's amazing. Everybody who helped today, like you helped a family of orphans. Like you just, that's what you did. So thank you. And I am on the podcast front. I got some other things coming. Nick and I have been working on something called Pod Capital, a podcast series for his Substack called Red Scare. We're gonna be diving into Das Kapital chapter by chapter. We just did first episode. We read the intro, Marx's intro, the 1867 intro, the first one. So we're gonna do that. It'll be about every week. I think we might even be live streaming them. So join us for that. You have to join Nick's Substack for all of them. Some of them, a few of them, including the first one, will be on for my patrons. But most of this is going to be on, the bulk of it will be on Nick's show. So go sign up for that. Support Nick. He's our comrade. And thank you, everyone. Thank you, Jay. Thank you, Adnan. Thank you to everyone who joined. Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Mtume. We really helped this wonderful young man. And I'm waiting for him to check in. This is the scary part of the day. But yeah, I'm waiting for him to check in to give him the good news. But thank you, everyone. I really appreciate it. You guys are great.
Yeah, thank you, Sina. Thank you for calling us all together. And it's great always to be in conversation with both of you and Nick and Mtume. So and hopefully we'll hear some good news from Mohammed soon and can share share that with folks. But thank you. Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and wrap up here, but I appreciate everybody for the time, and for the chat was great today. Thank you for all of your support. It's just wonderful. So And I will add links to the show description from some of the different things that we talked about and referenced, in terms of shows and stuff that's coming up. So, all right, everybody, have a good day.